I have always believed that a home carries the echoes of those who built it. Every creak of the wooden floor, every flicker of the chandelier above my head whispers memories of my late husband. He built this mansion with his hands, his sweat, and his brilliance. Not just the bricks and mortar, he built an empire, businesses, properties, investments. But what he treasured most was not the wealth itself, it was the legacy, the idea that our family would be safe for generations. Now, sometimes I wonder if he would weep to see what that legacy has become. Before we dive in, if you enjoy stories about family drama, exposing manipulators, and justice being served, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this story ends. Since my husband passed, the air inside these walls has felt heavier, colder. Family dinners, once filled with laughter, have become silent negotiations of power. I see it in my son Eric's eyes. Hesitation, guilt, shadows of a man torn between right and wrong. And I see it in Teresa, his wife. Oh, Teresa. Elegance draped in silk, charm polished to perfection, but behind her smile is a hunger I cannot ignore. It was late one evening, the kind of night when the house feels too quiet, when grief sits beside you like an uninvited guest. I was seated in my late husband's leather armchair in the living room, staring at the fire as if it could warm the loneliness in my bones. That's when I felt a small hand tug gently at my sleeve. My grandson, Ethan, 9 years old, bright as the morning sun, with eyes far too perceptive for a child his age. He leaned in close, his little heart pounding so hard I could feel it against my arm. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Mom and Dad said they're going to put you in a nursing home. They want all of Grandpa's money. Please, please don't tell them I told you." My breath caught. For a moment, the entire world seemed to still. I blinked at him, unable to process what I had just heard. A nursing home? My own flesh and blood, my son, conspiring to cast me aside like an old, useless relic? I wanted to tell myself it was a child's imagination, some misunderstanding overheard and exaggerated. But Ethan's eyes, oh, those eyes, wide, fearful, and wet with the weight of truth. Children rarely lie when they are afraid. I clasped his hand, pressing it against my lips to hush him before his words could carry into the hall. My voice trembled as I whispered back, "Ethan, darling, are you certain of what you heard?" He nodded, tears brimming. "They said it when they thought I was asleep. Mom said, once the doctor says you're not well, everything will belong to them. Then they'll send you away." A chill spread through me, one that no fire could chase away. I hugged him tightly, holding on as though I could shield him from the ugliness of the truth. I whispered into his hair, "Thank you for telling me. And don't you worry, my boy. Your grandmother is not as weak as they think." But before I could gather myself, before I could think of what to say next, Teresa appeared in the doorway. Her presence was like a shadow stretching across the room. She wore that familiar smile, perfect, polished, and poisonous. "There you are, Mother. Talking so late into the night? You should really be resting. At your age, you need your strength. But don't worry. Soon you won't need to worry about anything at all." Her words dripped like honey, but the undertone was venom. She kissed Ethan's forehead, her eyes flickering to me with a glance that said, "I see everything." Then she guided him out of the room, leaving me in silence with my racing heart. I sat frozen in that chair, her words replaying in my mind. Soon you won't need to worry about anything at all. What did she mean? Was it a warning? A promise?
or simply the arrogance of a woman convinced she had already won. That night, sleep would not come. The walls felt like they were closing in, and my mind chased shadows until the clock struck past midnight. I decided to walk the halls of my own home, something I often did when grief made the silence unbearable. But that night, the silence was broken. As I passed the corridor near the Eric study, I heard voices, low, hurried, urgent. My footsteps stilled, and I pressed myself against the wall, listening. Eric's voice came first, weary, conflicted. "Teresa, I don't know if this is right. She's still my mother. She's grieving, she's fragile, but she's not incapable." And then Teresa, her tone sharper now, stripped of the sugar she fed me earlier. "Don't be foolish. Once she's declared unfit, everything transfers to us. Do you really want to wait years for what should already be ours? The nursing home is just temporary. Out of sight, out of mind. You'll see. It's the only way."
My knees nearly buckled. My own son, the boy I carried, nursed, and raised with love, standing silent while his wife plotted to steal everything his father had worked for. And though his voice wavered, he did not stop her. He did not defend me. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from gasping aloud. My heart was pounding so violently I feared it would give me away. In that moment, Ethan's whispered warning rang louder in my mind than ever. "Please don't tell them I told you." He had been right. Every word. I staggered back to my room that night, my chest tight, my spirit trembling. But as the darkness surrounded me, something within me began to harden. Grief gave way to fire. Fear turned into resolve. If they believed I was too old, too frail, too blind to see their schemes, then they had gravely underestimated me. They may have forgotten, but I was my husband's partner in everything he built. The empire they covet stands on both of our shoulders. And if Teresa thinks she can strip me of my dignity, of my legacy, she will soon discover the strength of a woman who has already faced loss and survived it. As I lay in bed, staring into the darkness, I whispered a vow to myself. They will not break me. They will not take what is mine. But what I didn't yet know was that this was only the beginning, that their plan was far deeper, far more sinister than even Ethan had overheard, and that by morning, they would already be moving to trap me. Morning sunlight spilled into my room that day, but instead of warmth, it carried a heaviness that pressed down on me. The night before, I had overheard enough to know my son and his wife were plotting against me. I barely slept, my mind turning over and over like restless waves. When Teresa appeared at my door after breakfast, her tone was syrupy sweet. "Mother," she said, smoothing her silk blouse as though rehearsed for the role of dutiful daughter-in-law, "I've scheduled you a routine checkup with Dr. Lewis, just to make sure you're doing well. At your age, we can't be too careful, can we?" I forced a smile, though my stomach twisted. "Of course, dear, it's good to be cautious." But as she turned away, Ethan slipped into the hall, his eyes wide and urgent. He leaned close, whispering so quietly I barely heard him. "Grandma, don't go. They told the doctor to say you're sick in the head. They want him to write it down." My heart clenched. My sweet boy. He had already risked so much by telling me the truth, and now he was risking even more. I squeezed his hand gently. "Don't worry, Ethan. Let them play their game. They've forgotten who taught them to play chess." That afternoon, Teresa escorted me to the clinic, her hand resting lightly on my arm as though she were guiding a frail old woman who might crumble at any moment. If only she knew how fire burned inside me now. Dr. Lewis greeted us warmly, but I could see it, the flicker in his eyes, the hesitation when Teresa's hand lingered on his shoulder just a second too long. He was their man, bought, persuaded, or pressured. I wasn't sure which one. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, pulling out a notepad, "I just need to ask you a few questions. Routine, you understand?" "Of course," I replied, folding my hands calmly in my lap. His questions began simple enough. "Do you know what day it is, the year, the current president?" I answered with crisp precision, even throwing in a few extra details for good measure. His brow furrowed, as though my clarity was a nuisance. Then the questions grew sly. "Have you been forgetting things lately? Misplacing items? Feeling confused?" I smiled gently, tilting my head. "Well, doctor, sometimes I do misplace things. Just last week I misplaced my reading glasses and found them on top of my head. I laughed at myself for an hour. But tell me, don't we all do that no matter the age?" He chuckled nervously, scratching his pen against the paper. Teresa shifted beside me, clearly dissatisfied. "And have you had moments," he pressed, "where you feel unsafe at home, perhaps unsure of what's happening around you?" I leaned forward, letting my voice drop to a whisper that forced him to look up from his notes. "Doctor, the only thing that makes me feel unsafe at home is the way some people look at me when they think I'm not watching." His pen froze. Teresa stiffened. I sat back, serene, as though I had revealed nothing at all. By the end of that appointment, Dr. Lewis looked flustered, his notes disjointed. He muttered something about monitoring and suggested a follow-up visit. Teresa's smile was brittle, but she masked her frustration well. On the drive home, she spoke in a tone dripping with false concern. "Mother, the doctor says you're stable for now, but perhaps it's time we considered professional care, someone who could be here for you all the clock." I placed a hand over hers, patting it as though grateful. "Oh, Teresa, how thoughtful you are. Yes, maybe it's time we consider all options." Her eyes glimmered with victory, but inside, I was already weaving my next move. That evening, at the dinner table, Teresa and Eric circled me like vultures dressed in polite smiles. Between bites of roasted chicken, Eric cleared his throat. "Mother, we've been thinking, a nurse perhaps, or even a residence that specializes in elder care. You'd have friends your age, activities." I let my fork clatter gently against the plate, sighing. "Perhaps you're right. Maybe I am too much of a burden here." Their eyes lit up, like children who had just glimpsed their Christmas gifts hidden under the bed. They thought they were winning. They thought I was surrendering. But under the table, a small hand slipped something into mine. Ethan. A simple notebook. When I opened it later in my room, I found his scrawled handwriting. "You have to outsmart them. Write everything down so they can't twist your words." Tears pricked my eyes, not from sorrow, but from pride. That boy had the soul of a warrior. Together, we would not only survive this game, we would beat them at it. Later that night, I wandered into Eric's study, pretending to look for a book. The desk lamp was still on, papers scattered across the polished wood. My eyes landed on a document partially tucked under a ledger. I froze. With trembling fingers, I pulled it free. It was a legal draft, signed, dated, and already stamped. A petition to the court declaring me mentally unfit to manage my affairs. The words blurred as my vision swam with rage and betrayal. At the bottom, Eric's signature scrawled in ink. My son, my own son. I clutched the paper to my chest, my breath coming in sharp gasps. They weren't just plotting. They were ready. The net was already woven, and I was standing directly in the center. That night, as I sat in the dark of my room, the empire my husband had built loomed larger in my thoughts. They weren't just trying to steal money. They were trying to erase me, to lock me away and silence me while they picked apart the bones of everything we built together. But I swore then and there I would not be erased. They wanted me weak, frail, and forgotten. Instead, I would make them remember who I was. And what they didn't know, what they could never have predicted, was that I was about to find an ally who would change everything. There are moments in life when the past reaches forward and steadies you, almost as if those you've lost are still watching, still guiding you. For me, that moment came when I remembered something my late husband once told me. It was years ago, long before sickness claimed him. We had been sitting in this very house sipping tea when he leaned close, his voice low and serious. "If anyone ever tries to take what's yours, trust Howard. He knows everything." At the time, I brushed it off as a precaution, perhaps a husband's way of protecting his wife in case of unforeseen troubles. But now it echoed in my mind like a lifeline. Howard. Mr. Charles Howard, my husband's old lawyer and confidant, a man who had handled every contract, every investment, every safeguard my husband ever created. If anyone could help me, it would be him. But before I reached out, I needed proof strong enough to withstand the lies Teresa and Eric were weaving. That proof, I knew, would be hidden in my husband's private study. The study had been locked since his death, the key tucked away in the drawer of his bedside table. Most believed it was just a sentimental space left untouched out of grief. But I knew my husband better than that. He was a man of foresight. He always left breadcrumbs. Late one evening, when the house had gone quiet and Teresa's heels no longer clicked across the marble floors, I slipped into his old bedroom. Ethan followed close behind, his small footsteps soft as feathers. I pulled open the drawer, and there it was, the brass key, dulled with time but still heavy with promise. My hand shook as I turned it in the study door. The lock clicked, and the door groaned open. The air inside smelled of leather, cedar, and something faintly metallic, as though the room itself had been waiting. Books lined the shelves, their spines worn from years of his touch. On the desk, stacks of ledgers and files lay neatly arranged, as though he had only just left the room. My heart tightened. I could almost see him sitting there, glasses perched on his nose, scribbling notes with that determined frown he wore when working. Ethan darted toward a drawer, pulling it open with childish eagerness. "Grandma, look," he whispered. Inside were envelopes, dozens of them, each labeled meticulously. Tax records, property deeds, partnership agreements. And then buried beneath them all, one that stole my breath away. A plain white envelope with my name scrawled in his handwriting. For Teresa. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter. His words were careful, deliberate. "My love, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer there to protect you. Beware, greed is the shadow that follows fortune, and even those we love can be tempted by it. Remember, the empire is in your name. It was always meant to be yours, not theirs. If anyone dares to question your right, go to Howard. Trust him, and trust yourself." Tears blurred my vision, but my heart swelled with renewed strength. My husband had known.
Somehow, he had foreseen this, and he had left me not only a warning, but a weapon. Among the other documents, I found updated wills, proof of business ownership, and records meticulously signed and dated. They weren't just papers, they were shields, crafted to protect me if the storm ever came. The next morning, I made a quiet call to Mr. Howard. My voice trembled as I introduced myself, though he recognized me instantly.
"Mrs. Caldwell," he said warmly, "your husband trusted me with his life's work, and he trusted me with you. What troubles you?" When I told him everything, the whispers, the doctor, the petition, I could hear him inhale sharply. Then his voice grew steady, firm. "Your husband prepared for this. If they succeed in declaring you unfit, the estate doesn't pass to them, it passes into a charitable trust. They would lose everything. But there's a condition. You must prove their conspiracy. Without proof, the court might believe them." I sat there in silence, the weight of it sinking in. My enemies were not only greedy, they were careless enough to underestimate me. And now I knew exactly how to fight. Ethan and I spent hours cataloging what we had found. He scribbled notes in his little notebook, his young brow furrowed in concentration. "Grandma," he said, "we're going to beat them. Just like chess, right? We'll trap them before they trap you." I smiled at him, pride and sorrow twisting together in my chest. "Yes, Ethan. But remember, chess is about patience. One wrong move, and we lose everything." But even patience couldn't prepare me for what happened next. That evening, at dinner, I noticed Teresa watching Ethan with unusual intensity. She leaned forward, her fork poised delicately in her hand, and said, "Ethan, darling, where were you today? You seemed busy." Ethan froze, the color draining from his face. He glanced at me, then back at his plate. Before he could answer, Teresa's lips curled into a smile, sharp, knowing, dangerous. "You know, curiosity can be dangerous for children," she said softly, her gaze never leaving his. The words hung in the air like a knife. Eric shifted uncomfortably, but he said nothing. Ethan dropped his fork, his little hands trembling. I forced a laugh, though inside my blood ran cold. "Oh, Teresa, he's just a boy. Let him have his adventures." She smiled again, wider this time, but her eyes told me she knew. She knew Ethan had been where he should not have been. She suspected the study, perhaps even the documents. That night, I held Ethan close, whispering, "Don't be afraid, my darling. They may suspect, but suspicion is not proof, and now we must be smarter than ever. But deep down, fear not at me." Because Teresa's smile had not been the smile of someone merely suspicious, it had been the smile of a predator who had just caught the scent of prey. And I knew the next move in this deadly game was hers. I'll never forget the day I walked into that courtroom. The heavy wooden doors groaned as they opened, and the faint smell of polished oak and dust filled my lungs. To anyone watching, I must have looked like a frail old woman, slow steps, cane in hand, a thin veil of exhaustion over my face. But inside I carried a storm, a fire that no one in that room could see. I had spent weeks preparing for this very moment. Teresa and Eric thought they were leading me like a lamb to slaughter, but I was walking into the battlefield with truth as my weapon. Still, I kept my mask on, fragile, weary, helpless. It was exactly what they expected, and I wanted them to believe their victory was already sealed.
As I sat down, I noticed Teresa across the aisle, dressed in her finest tailored suit, her hair pulled tight, lips curved into that self-satisfied smile I had come to know so well. Eric sat beside her, looking less sure, his eyes darting toward me, but quickly falling when our gazes met. He couldn't hold it, not with the guilt weighing on him. But Teresa, she wore arrogance like perfume, thick and choking.
The judge entered, his presence commanding silence. His gavel hit the desk with a thud that echoed through my bones. This was it. The moment they would try to erase me, strip me of my dignity, and lock me away. Teresa was first to speak. She rose gracefully, her voice dripping with false concern. "Your Honor, we are here today because my dear mother-in-law has sadly become unfit to manage her affairs. She is confused, unstable, and frequently forgetful. Her well-being is at stake, and we only wish to protect her." I wanted to laugh at the performance, but I kept my face neutral, my hands folded neatly in my lap. She continued, waving a stack of papers dramatically. "These are the medical evaluations from Dr. Lewis, who has cared for her for years. They clearly state she is suffering from cognitive decline. We cannot, in good conscience, allow her to remain in charge of such a vast estate. She needs professional care. A nursing home will provide her with safety, structure, and comfort." Her words slithered across the room, and for a moment I saw sympathetic faces in the crowd. Friends, neighbors, even distant relatives. They looked at me with pity, and I let them, because pity today would mean shock tomorrow. Eric was called next. His voice lacked Teresa's sharpness, but he supported her claims. "It's not that we don't love her," he said, eyes fixed on the floor. "We just want what's best. She's been struggling since my father passed, and, well, we worry." Oh, how those words cut. My own son, standing there, painting me as broken and incapable. But I stayed quiet. My time would come. Finally, the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice steady, but not unkind. "Do you wish to respond?" I rose slowly, my cane clicking against the floor. For a moment, I allowed myself to appear exactly as they described me, frail, shaky, unsure. Then I lifted my head, squared my shoulders, and let my voice ring out with a strength that surprised even me. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." A hush fell over the courtroom. My daughter-in-law has painted me as weak, confused, and unfit. But let me tell you the truth. For months, I have been the target of a scheme to strip me of everything my husband and I built, everything we worked for, and everything I still stand for. They do not care about my well-being. They care about money, about power, and they will do whatever it takes to seize it. Gasps rippled through the audience. Teresa's face drained of color, and Eric slumped back in his seat, defeated. But I wasn't finished. I reached into my bag and pulled out the letters, my late husband's words, sealed and kept safe all these years. I read them aloud, his voice echoing through mine. He had foreseen this greed, warned me of it, and entrusted me with safeguards. And then I handed over the final piece, a sworn statement from Mr. Howard, the lawyer my husband trusted. His testimony was clear. If I were ever declared unfit, the estate would not fall to Teresa and Eric, but instead transferred to a charitable trust, funding schools and shelters, not greedy hands. The judge reviewed the evidence in silence. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of justice itself. Mrs. Caldwell, the court finds you more than capable of handling your own affairs. The petition is denied. Furthermore, given the evidence of conspiracy and attempted fraud, Eric and Teresa Caldwell are hereby stripped of all inheritance rights tied to this estate. Silence. Then, chaos. Teresa shot to her feet, screaming, her mask of elegance shattered into rage. "You can't do this! That money was supposed to be ours!" She lunged toward Eric, blaming him while he sat with his head in his hands, broken and ashamed. The bailiff intervened, and the judge struck his gavel again. Order was restored, but their downfall was complete. Ethan reached for my hand, and I held it tightly, pride swelling in my chest. We had done it, not just for me, but for the legacy of the man I loved and the family we once were. As we walked out of that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in years. I was not powerless. I was not voiceless. I was still standing, stronger than ever. And to those of you listening now, I want you to remember this. Age is not weakness. Wisdom is strength. Love is power. And truth will always outshine greed. So if this story touched you, if it reminded you that resilience matters, then I ask you to stay with me. Subscribe to this channel. Join me in sharing stories of strength and survival. And let's remind the world that we are never too old, too frail, or too forgotten to fight back. Because sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths.